A couple days ago, I got to sit down with my friend and teammate Andrew Porat to talk about his evil King Gdora list that he used to take down the Albuquerque Major Regional. Now, if you don't know, Andrew also won the Denver Major Regional just a couple months ago, so that makes back-to-back United States Regionals won by Andrew Porat. These are about 100-player events, so theoretically the odds of winning one of these should be about 1%. The odds of winning back-to-back should be 0.01%. That's insane, but Drew is just that guy. He is extremely intelligent, extremely good at this game, and you're really going to hear that in this conversation. I can say with near 100% certainty that at both of those regionals, Drew was the most prepared player in the room. He had put hundreds of hours of practice and thought into his decks, understood all of his matchups, and just a lot of theory goes into his deck building. So this was an opportunity to kind of open up on that deck building process and his preparation for a major regional. Now, we talked for about an hour and a half. I shortened this quite a bit to about 45 minutes of our conversation, and I was having a little bit of audio issues, but nothing too major. And if you stick with it, I promise you that it will be well worth it, and you'll be happy that you did so. So without any more talking, here is our conversation. When I'm building a deck that's going to do well at one of these major events for like a regional, I typically ask myself two questions, and these are pretty obvious. How do I win? What's the core idea? Do I have a very clear game plan on how I win? And then if the answer to this question isn't me winning on turn 2, then I also need to answer, how do I not lose? If you want to win on turn 3 and beyond, you need to have a way to survive. So with your King Gdora deck, what are your answers to those two questions? Like, my idea is this, and you can tell me if I'm off base here or you would word it differently. But when I think of King Gdora, I think of him as like the king of backswings. Like, because he's so difficult to kill, he invites you to overextend, and then he can pick up any attack that he wants for the backswing. He can pick up the true 100%. You're playing like an Irwin's Final Charge. Your list of attacks to me is kind of crazy. Like, a lot of these I wouldn't even be thinking to be kind of putting together. Like the Ravages of War feels so like out of the blue. But how would you word that? What was your game plan to win?
Honestly, like it's simple, but not as simple as it sounds. It's like um, eventually you get to a board state where if the opponent you're playing isn't on the right symbols, which again, what are they? Death attuned, void
Mhm.
attuned. You just win with true 100%, right? And the variance win con is like Patchwork Baby, which I build the deck with your question two first, so maybe it would actually be better to start there. But
Mhm.
I needed to play for Gigantification Swing. Like people playing Vile Seizing, like just play this; it's better. It's doing the same thing. Gigantification Swing has 4 keywords, and none of them are the same as Patchwork Baby. I'm sure that whoever designed the girl power actually thought that one through and was like, somebody one day will play this combo with the 2 secret rares, and I'm your guy. Patchwork Baby was like this alt win con of like, hey, if my opponent just disrespects me early and I get stuck with like Gigantification Swing, I can play Patchwork Baby for like 9 damage minimum, and that's
Mhm.
pretty good. So you have this like pseudo stun package when I this is how I'm building the deck, right? So I'm starting with
Right.
Gigantification Swing, True 100, and then I'm like, okay, Patchwork Baby makes sense. So I got this like pseudo stun package with Patchwork Baby and Gdora, the card with Gdora's face on it, not really, sort of the Darkness Flame, which is like Hiei is like Gdora in another life for some reason to UVS designers. And so you're like, okay, well then try Gravity Beam has stun 3 on it, and this Sword of the Darkness Flame has stun 1. So you got like this pseudo stun package going as well. So it's like very very simple. Like true 100% is your primary win con. If they disrespect you, you might be able to Patchwork Baby them early. And then if your opponent isn't building foundations, like you have the Irwin's final charge, which is I always have like 20 foundations. So this is just like at all times a bomb.
Did you win a game with Irwin's final charge at the
Yeah,
regional?
yeah, I did. Exact lethal for like 26 damage. Irwin's final charge was a thing that happened.
What
You
what opponent was that? What round?
it was against like Godzilla. Poor
That's
guy, right?
awesome.
Yeah, and it was very fun. But like the thing is, I'm never taking a risk on playing Irwin's final charge. It's only after Try Gravity Beam, so it's like a 2 card combo. Because there's just no way I'm gonna get like gotcha after I play and blow up my whole stage. So Irwin's final charge was also my only discard outlet or destroy outlet in the deck.
Mhm.
So like if I was losing like to mill out, I just play Irwin's and like reset the odds of me milling out, which I did a couple of times during the event against other slow decks, and then they start to realize like, oh, now I have to actually kill you, which is not going to happen.
And that feeds into like the backswing nature of King Ghidorah. Is we saw that in the finals of Travis in game one was kind of using his incubatings early and then pretty quickly realized, wait a second, I'm gonna mill out. And then we saw him become much more aggressive in games 2 and 3 um, with Rodan, is just start hitting harder because your rivals start to realize that you're putting them on the clock. So all the pressure is on their side to attack.
So yeah, that brings to your initial point on Ravages of War. So I started at 0, then I went to 1, then I went to 4, and then I went to 2. And the reason is because Ravages of War is the perfect card for Rodan and other decks like that. Because the way that Travis won that game too, and the way that any deck would really win is you have to pop off so hard one turn that I just run out of cards in hand. Because the issue
Mhm.
is not me not being able to block or deal with your moves, because I will. Is you just have to overwhelm this Ghidorah list, right? And so
Mhm.
Ravages of War says it takes 2 cards to block this. Because one, you're stripping out of the hand, and the other's the 8 damage block. You got to block an 8 damage move, generally speaking.
Mhm.
So that's why it was so perfect against Rodan. And you saw I was just like playing it out of my discard pile a few times, because I was just trying to break his skull. Like I wasn't actually trying to really kill him. It was just like, I'm going to make you discard some attacks. And that's kind of the thing against Rodan, that it makes it so tough. And in a list where you're playing like 30% attacks or a little bit less, like to sculpt a 6-7 attack hand is like nearly impossible. And then when your opponent's doing stupid stuff like Ravages of War and Try Gravity Beam, it's like nearly impossible, right? So that's why Ravages of War was there. I really should have sideboarded 2 more for like the the Rodan matchups of the world, but it was a really nice 2x. I used it a lot.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we did see that Travis was really trying to sculpt those kill hands, but and then when he tried to become more aggressive, it was pretty difficult because yeah, you have to draw into 4 attacks, and now Ravages is forcing you to raw draw those off of your deck. Like if you could lead Ravages, anything else, and then you go into Trigrav, like you said, you just ripped 2 cards from their hand, and you're putting pressure on them to block some of these moves as well. So you're just ripping apart their hand. And then this Chronostasis trigger. Wanted to talk about this because you said you had a couple games. You had a game in Swiss where you won because you sealed Reiner. You sealed Reiner 1, and so he couldn't take an attack to 0 or damage reduce things. You had another one where you were in a Gdora mirror match, and your opponent was on a mill version of Gdora, and you said you found a line to kill him. It was triple Chronostasis trigger, followed by a finisher, but you checked 3s on it, and then that was one of your losses or maybe your tie. But talk to me a little bit about trigger, because this was one that I was
Yeah.
pretty surprised by that you have 3 copies of it.
So Chronostasis trigger, breaker 2 block, right?
Mm-hmm.
Insane value in a character who can. So now I think I had 11 breaker blocks in this deck, and then I played 4 fighting for controls and like twisty surroundings, and like so very hard to like string out. Like I was saying, that's how
Mm-hmm.
you win, right? And so that was the inspiration. right? So it started as like a one or two of, because I can play it from my discard as a block. And then I figured out, I'm like, there are no high quality openers on the evil symbol. I should just play more of Chronostasis Trigger and Gigantification. And so Chronostasis Trigger had this, like, I realized, like, this kind of also alt win con. So shout out to Brett at UK Versus. He was on Reiner 1. We were staring at each other, having a good time, just kind of building and watching. And he had attacks that shifted into backups. And finally, I drew like enough, and so I just Chronostasis Trigger, hit the backup, and and then he just like couldn't interact with me anymore. So Chronostasis Trigger was kind of this like get out of jail free card against backup decks, and also Gdora, because my worst matchup, I think, was Void Gdora, and the way that I figured I could win was this line of like 2 or 3 Chronostasis triggers, because you seal Gdora and then you play Tri-Gravity Beam, and I literally had it against the mill Gdora. Like I drew two Chronostasis triggers and the Tri-Grav, and I was like, I just win. And then I somehow checked all threes and my like 28% attack deck, and face planted and lost that game. Yeah, it was like the freest win ever too. Like, yeah, like 3 low Chronostasis triggers is just an insane thing to deal with, and I choked it.
Yeah, you checked the one. You managed to check the one on that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you've got
yeah,
the primary win condition of true 100%, secondary win condition of Patchwork Baby, stun package, finisher, and then this other like alternate win condition, Chronostasis trigger, sealing their character. That's such an interesting and probably undesired part, from the design team, was being able to just seal characters because you attacked a backup. But you might as well
yes.
exploit it if it's there. You might as well do it. Okay,
Let's
so
errata that if anyone on the design team watches, that's probably not how that should work.
yeah, but it's how it works right now, technically. Okay, so
One other thing I want to note
yes.
is that, I played like extremely low quality attacks, other than the few like super late game attacks, and they were literally all mids except for my 2 Ravages of War. And so this is like something I think people don't really like value in their deck building, right? Of like, if your strategy is not, doesn't need to be like that focused on like, oh, what are my openers, what are my zone mix-ups, like it didn't matter, right? Like for the strategy
Right.
I was playing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, your strategy was much more backswing and situational, and like your one of your common play patterns, and this will kind of go into question number 2, how do I not lose? One of your most common play patterns was like leading an attack like Tri-Gravity Beam, which you would think is a terrible opener. In the traditional sense, it's a 4 diff instead of a 5 diff. The main ability on it is blank. Like, it is just an attack, but it meant you got to enter the enhanced step, and one of your most common things was, I'm going to go grab my invincible body. I'm not going to use Gdora to find a block or another attack. I'm using it to find my best stage resource.
100%. Like I went from Rodan playing 8 zero diffs, because that's a character who, unlike Gdora, is very vulnerable early to just dying. Gdora is super hard to
Mm-hmm.
kill early with the awkward health. Um, and so I looked at the zero diffs on Evil and was just not entertained. And so like you start to figure out, right? Like I could just skip the zero diffs and play all of these. I think there are 4 one diffs on Evil / Voidatune that are flip draw card. And then Polite and Well Spoken, there's like a bunch of ways to make that like a, basically your 7-hander. And so that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of the strategy, was like, I'm just going to play all of these one diffs as like super high quality, like draw me, extend my hand size. And then I'm going to play like the extremely powerful 2 and 3 diffs on Evil Symbol, right? And so that was 100% the strategy, was like enter the enhanced step with garbage attack, extend my hand size with these one diffs or whatever I have, and then build in invincible body, shutdown, or nonagon. That and so like people were saying I was like greedy because I was playing. I think I played like 11 3 diffs, but like I didn't play that many attacks, and when I drew multiples, I just didn't build them all. like I
Yeah.
just held them in my hand and it was fine.
Yeah. So if I was to, sum that up, it's how do you not lose? Well, one, you're Ghidorah, so you have 3 heads. And then I'm going to have a higher quality stage than you have for defense. Like you were not messing around with your foundations. None of the 0 difficulty foundations, high number of 3 difficulty foundations, using Ghidorah to find the foundations you want. Yeah, and like you said, when we look at the spam foundations, it's either like speed hate, like incubating or unmatched quickness, deadlock, like taking the gloves off, and then pretty much everything else is just draw, right? Because if you want to play solid defense, you need cards in hand. So treasure hunting, battle for dominance, attitude selector, settling old debts, just a lot of draw spam foundations to get in. But then you're leaning on the Nonagon, Shutdown, and Invincible Body um, to also take pressure off of your hand size. And because you have these 2 breaker 2 attacks with swing and chronostasis trigger, you're also pairing it with like fighting for control and twisty surroundings. And then to top it all off, you got triple Dr. Ichigaki. Like everything in your stage is extremely high quality foundations. I guess most often you were picking Invincible Body. Did you think that was your MVP in your stage?
For sure. Invincible Body is like the best defensive piece probably in the game, with like Nonagon as a close second. And
Mm-hmm.
I think people really maybe overrate when cards are unique, or underrate rather, right? Like I think Travis was on 4 Science Bros. I'm on 3 Ichigagi and 3 Nonagon. Like it's not a
Mm-hmm.
big deal if you draw the extra, because the unique 3 diffs are like insane in this game. And so you just like block with it or review it, right? It's like not such a big deal. So I think that was like a huge edge for me, right? And so um, yeah, Invincible Body was my go-to, but like seeing Dr. Ichigaki was game breaking, I would say. Like
Mm-hmm.
having it basically every other turn, just drawing it was super helpful.
Yeah, let's talk about that's a really good point you make. Yeah, and then like all the Nick Reagan decks are like 4xing incompatible quirks. I was 4xing incompatible quirks in Mikasa, just with like a 60 card deck.
Yeah.
Sometimes when a unique foundation is just busted, you play it 3 or 4x. You don't care about the 1 or 2. Let's find it on turn 1 um, every time. Shutdown was the card that you were talking about, saying that this was the best card in the Lower Decks Challenger series. Did it come in handy throughout the event, equal to your expectations?
Yes. If anything, I acknowledge before the event that this was a card that I probably should have been playing more of, but
Mhm.
but I didn't want to play too many 3 diffs, and so it got stuck to 2 and 1 in the sideboard. And Shutdown was insane. People had never seen this card. I got somebody who one of the Gdoras I played was on Plummeting Punch. He played his first Plummeting Punch. I non-agoned it. He played the second one, and I shut downed it. And it was just like this guy was in jail. And so um, Shutdown is the best card from the lower decks, the crown jewel of the lower decks, I would say. And it is a card like I think a lot of higher, most super sweaty competitive players understand that there are some defense, like the core fundamentals of Universe's defense is blocking, and then you layer in this like damage reduction strategy, and you layer in this flash strategy or seal strategy, and like there are real defensive pieces that you can play, as long as you're on the right symbols. And so
Mhm.
that is like cut down guys, like it's insane. Try it. It's a real good card.
Yeah, and so the fighting for controls, I assume the fighting for controls and twisty surroundings are more for like turn 2, turn 3, the early turns where those really matter, before you've built up a solid stage of all of the cancels and resets and flashes.
100%. You're thinking about it right. They're extremely good early, but also it's just like so hard to again, like the way you beat this deck is a stupid, like insane string. And no matter how, even if you have 15 foundations, if you're getting like breaker two blocked twice and you get hit with a shutdown or fighting for control or a twisty, like you just like can't finish the string. And
Hmm.
if you come up short, like you will just die to Gdora because I can true 100 out of the discard pile. So it's kind of like this, it's just a good card. And I I find it funny that nobody will play fighting for control, it seems, except very, very small number of the players, but everybody's playing Keiko's Aid when fighting for control is simply better Keiko's Aid. And it's on like they share some symbols. So it's like another shout out in addition to Shutdown is like you should probably just play fighting for control. It's just better than Keiko's Aid. It's one less check, but who cares?
Yeah, it's a response speed. Response speed is everything. So often people use their Keiko's aids and then their opponent was going to build anyway. Fighting for control, you are never using it wrong. You can time it.
Yeah, I even used it that one game. Like, my opponent had two foundations and they checked a 6 on a 5, and I was just like, okay, let's just like try to end their turn, like because my strategy is just to buy time, right? So it's like
Mhm.
you literally can't go wrong if you're using this. Like, it's only helpful.
Yeah, and then the last foundation that I found was interesting was taking the gloves off. Was that purely for the deadlock? And were you playing that in your early list? Was that kind of a later addition?
Yeah, this was always in the list. Like, as if anyone who watched the finals match saw, like Deadlock is not a stranger, and there are
Mhm.
so few good deadlocks in this game. It's like risky gamble. The card that does something when backups get destroyed. I can't remember the name, and then like taking the gloves off. And if you're not playing an aggressive strategy, you just kind of need that to
Mhm.
give you the edge. Like there were a bunch of games where I would snipe an always cool or something like that, and in the finals I was sniping hacker as much as possible. Like there are some cards that you just like are extraordinary value on defense that my deck was not built to play against. And so like I needed to taking the gloves off and and basically fix my shortfalls. So I think that's like a must play if you can play it and you're playing a long game. Like it's one of the only impactful deadlocks.
If you made it this far and haven't done so already, I would really appreciate if you left this video a like, comment, made sure that you're subscribed to my channel. Any point of interaction that you do is very, very helpful for the algorithm. Okay, for this next section of our conversation, we're going to talk about cards that I was surprised that Drew excluded from his King Ghidorah deck, and then we're going to go into his sideboard and the sideboard theory. Okay, first on the action side, there's a very obvious one. It's combined firepower. This was errata to be King Ghidorah only, and you had no copies of it in your deck and no copies in the sideboard. Um, Talk me through why you made that decision and when that decision happened.
So it started in the deck and it just felt really awkward in Ghidorah. It feels so much better in Rodan when your character removes because
Mhm.
when I remove, like, say I remove like True 100% or Chronostasis trigger on defense, if I'm blocking with combined firepower, my opponent's just going to stop and I'm losing my piece, right? It's removed from the game.
Mhm.
That situation just felt terrible, and so I wasn't finding ways to use it on defense, and it was not necessary on offense. Like I was saying, my deck was not trying to like incrementally do 6-7 damage moves. It was trying to like blow you out. So it didn't fit in the deck. The other card that actually started as a 0 in my deck was Relentless Challenger, which is the actual Ghidorah card, 2/6 +1 -1 damage. um, it started as a 0, and when I removed Firepower, this card came in. And the reason that I like this card was the deflect. And I got a lot of people with deflect too. Like it's so obnoxious when you do exact health or one over and you stop using your damage pump and then Ghidorah deflects 2 and stays at 1 or 2. Like that interaction is just broken. Like
Which
that
was
is a
the relentless challenger?
yeah, the deflect too. Like
Mhm.
in the top 8 match against Ross, I got him with it, and it was like it's a blowout. Like I know I've said to our team, like there are a few cards in this game that are blowout cards, and Relentless Challenger Deflect 2 is a blowout card. Like when you do that, your opponent just loses the game, right? Because they don't even realize that they misplayed. And so I was afraid that Nick Reagan's were going to deflect 4 with Lightning Rod, but it was just never relevant, because that is such a blowout when you like you think you have the game and they just deflect out of their hand. Like that interaction is insane value.
Yeah, and because they abandoned the deflect keyword so quickly, nobody remembers it exists in the game. And so nobody will ever see it coming, unless they've played a lot of Gdora as well. So let's also talk about this action, Barrier Shield. You're playing defending Pageant Queens as your speed resets, but it seems like on first glance that Barrier Shield would go really well with your strategy of twisty surroundings, fighting for control, Chronostasis trigger, gigantification swing, like this breaker strategy, and this heavy reset strategy. So was it just too taxing on your hand, or what was the reason you left it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think if like for starters, I read the character and the character doesn't say you can play actions from your discard pile, right? So it's like if
Mhm.
you want to play the Barrier Shield package, you got to play Fierce Wings, which is another action because that one lets you pick up Barrier Shield, and it's like I don't think I'm optimal playing that instead of Pageant Queen. Like Pageant Queen, I can play from my discard pile, and so it's just doing like this. Like I have the breaker with the cards I can play from the
Mhm.
discard pile or my hand, and so like I again, like how am I losing? I'm losing to strings, right? And so Barrier Shield is while it is an insanely good card in 7-handers. I think, and you could say this is a wild take, a hot take, but I don't think 6-handers should really be playing Barrier Shield unless you're going to like commit to it and play Fierce Wings with it, because those two go together, and I didn't want to play those two cards. So, I think Barrier Shield's a little bit overrated in 6-handers, and like you should just not play it in a 5-hander. Like it is
Yeah.
insane. It's a blowout card in 7-handers because you can afford to play it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and we saw, I think, a Ghidorah list in Oceania. I think it was Torin. He was playing the Fierce Wings, Barrier Shield, and then like close combat tackle to go and grab. But I suppose you're saying that that's too many actions for what King Ghidorah wants to be playing. So let's go to some attacks. You were leaving off Tetra Terror Onslaught, which you can of course play it from outside your hand, and it gets 6 speed, and then you can echo it and go find another 4 difficulty move like a Trigrav or something. Vile Seizing as well, Insane Deadlock, which since you're playing into long games, I think the average viewer would say, wait, you should definitely want Vile Seizing because of the Deadlock. It's going to win, and it goes along with your Breaker package. So why were these left at the door for like you said, kind of weak attacks, like the Hiei attack or swing or Chronostasis trigger? Like what pushed those cards above these ones?
Yeah, I mean, Tetra Terror is just a like awkward card when my strategy is not to lose health. Like that's why we'll get to Runaway, right? Like
Hmm.
um, I don't want to lose health. I want to gain health. And so, like on the Hiei card, sort of the Darkness Flame, like I didn't even use the lose health unless I was at max health because it's like I just want to gain the health. I don't want to I don't want to
Hmm.
help my opponent any more than I can, right? And so, like in I think Tetra Terror is like an insane card in Ymir with or with Dual Needle Lunge or in aggressive decks where you can spend your health because you don't care. Um,
Right.
in my deck, I care. So I don't think that one's a playable option. And then in terms of Vile Seizing, like Gigantification Swing is just better. And like, I don't know if you're still playing Vile Seizing, like good for you, but like it's time. It's time to move on. Like that Breaker one, the Deadlock is irrelevant unless you have like 2 or 3 of them. And like I'm not gonna play Vile Seizing and watch my opponent check a 3 and commit 4 to pass the or you know what I mean, like to pass the
Hmm.
check a 7 and deny me draw, and like what am I going to do? I'm not going to punish them. So it's like I'm not going to play Vile Seizing. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I find that the deadlock on Vile Seizing is way worse than it used to be because, like in the MHA era when this came out, it was all about blocking on defense. But these days, a lot of defense isn't blocking. Like, no damage reduction character like Grog cares about you using this Deadlock. Or like Irwin. We saw Jacob Johnson's Irwin list was just had insane damage reduction. Like, they don't care about the Deadlock, or like your cards you're playing, Shutdown, Nonagon, Invincible Body. None of these matter. And then the 3 speed, yeah. I think most of the good players in the game have caught on to early turns. You're almost always committing to pass the check for the 7.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I was playing no stun hate, no destruction outlets, and no zero dips, right? So it's like, go ahead and try,
yeah.
I'm just gonna like, if you're trying to do that, I'm just gonna like way out build you, and it doesn't
Mhm.
matter.
Yeah. And then on the
Yeah,
foundation side, incompatible quirks kind of jumps out at me as like a speed reduction, also a like trim your stage back a little bit. Sins of the, although it's removing instead of destroying, which is a real cost. And then Sins of the Past, getting to remove things from your rival's discard pile. I suppose Sins of the Past went down a little bit in its strength post firepower ban. But it was also like a draw card outlet if you had momentum. So talk to me about leaving out Quirks and Sins of the Past. And did you test them in the list?
tested both. Quirks is an aggro card. I'm now convinced you shouldn't play it unless you're trying to kill people early. Like that card
Mm-hmm.
gets insane value because it can be like 3 or 4 foundations, and you're blowing up your stage when you don't care. In me playing a slow deck, like you playing Quirks is just hurting your own game. So
Mm-hmm.
like just like build more or play Shutdown or Nonagon or Body that is like better, and so Quirks was no good in my opinion. The best interaction with Quirks was removing Polite and Well Spoken and just replaying it, but like it was too cute. Sins of the Past
Mm-hmm.
is I can't get momentum and always, and so like it's I'm not gonna like play a card just to remove a card from my opponent's like discard pile. Like that's not very good, for a 2
Yeah.
diff. What do you want me to cut? Like tell me what to cut. Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree with you on Sins of the Past
Yeah.
on leaving it out. I just when I go to like UVS Ultra, I just pulled up like 10 other Evil Ghidorah lists, and almost all of them were playing, these 6 cards that I just showed that you very specifically excluded. And I think they're cards that, like, when you're building an evil deck, you're scrolling through UVS Ultra, you're just adding Vile Seizing without even thinking about it, or you're adding Barrier Shield without even thinking about it. Firepower has Gdora's face on it. Um, you remember that comment I got on a video saying like,
Oh,
I know why
I'll
you
never forget
Yeah,
it.
I know why you didn't win with Pony. It was because you didn't play Horn Dash Hammer. Sometimes life gives you signs. It has Pony's face on it. That's what, like, if you had lost, someone would leave that comment on this YouTube video. How God's giving you a sign to play Firepower, and you're choosing not to play it. But now that we talked about your deck, let's talk about your sideboard. You had like extra copies of a lot of cards in here, an extra copy of Trigger, Irwin's Final Charge, Pageant Queen, Shutdown. And then you had 3 cards that you didn't have in your main board: Airy, Dragon of the Darkest Flame, and Runaway. In what situations would you bring these cards in?
Yeah, so this is something that I think people can level up their game if I did this in Denver and I did this again here, which is I had a very specific strategy if I won game one of what the sideboard. And so if I won game one, I would generally speaking side out 7 attacks and put in like Pageant Queen, Airy, Shutdown, Runaway, Chronostasis trigger, and just like win the game. Win 1-0.
You're
So
saying you
that
would
that was
go from a 28% attack ratio to like a 15% attack ratio, and
correct.
just basically run out the clock?
Yeah, if I won game one, it was over. You weren't you weren't winning game two. So I think that in Denver, I did the same thing, like a little bit less deliberately because it was more like a trial run where I just sided out like 7 or 8 attacks and put in more foundations or assets, and so it was like it was very successful. So that was what was going on here, which is why I didn't mainboard Runaway because like I remember when I was talking to the team about the list, it was like I was like, I wanted runaway in every matchup, but it's just not necessary. You look like if you can win game one without it, right? Like
Hmm.
it's a really good like I need to win game two card, or if I'm playing against aggro decks, I would like side out the Ravages of War and put in runaways and stuff like that. I was really surprised I could not resolve a single Airy over the weekend. That card really let
Hmm.
me down. I shouldn't have even bothered sideboarding it. It was just a blank. And then I had the Dragon of the Darkness Flame and Irwin's Final Charge for if I lost game one with like, it was a 40-minute game one or something, and I need to win game two and three quick. Um, this was something I tested, which is if I put in those three cards, Dragon of the Darkness Flame, two of Irwin's Final Charge, one more, I was able to like pretty consistently turn three kill. Like my deck changed
Hmm.
completely to like this like patchwork baby, Dragon of the Darkness Flame. Like all of a sudden I'm just like murdering people. Like game one I'm like a wall, and game two I'm like, oh, where did that come from?
Yeah, and it goes along with your stun package, like you were saying. It's got the stun one on there, yeah, and then you can always discard your hand for 9 damage on
Yeah,
Dragon of the
exactly.
Darkness Flame for 16 damage for if it's too small for people watching to read the text there. So okay, so speaking of, like you said, Airy was a bad choice. Oh, did you kill anybody with Darkness Flame over the weekend?
No, because I never had a situation where I like lost game one with like 40 minutes left. So it was never relevant, which felt bad because I cited it for that specific reason. Um,
Yeah.
but I would have totally won a game with it had that situation come up.
Yeah.
I tested it. Yeah.
So last thing on your deck, knowing what you know now of how the weekend went, was there anything that you would have changed about your deck?
The only thing is, I wish I sideboarded two more Ravages of War. Maybe I would say instead of Airy, but again, like the plan was worked. Like every time I won game one in Swiss, I won the set, except for against like an Air Nick when I won game one in like 15 minutes. So other than that, like unique situation, like I would cut the like one of Irwin's Final Charge and probably one Dragon of the Darkness Flame, and just play two more Ravages of War. Because if I would have had four Ravages of War against like Rodan in the finals, like that, it wouldn't have been as close. Like that card is
Right.
is a insane card against decks that can like also wall up because they'll never be able to sculpt the hand. Like they have to actually draw like six attacks off the rip, and they're like 20-30% attack, right? So that was the only
Yeah.
regret. Was I should have sideboarded more of those.
All right. All right. Yeah. So you went from 0 to 1 to 4 to 2, and now you wish you did like a 2+2 strategy.
Yeah, and I think it's worth talking about. Like, I think the people talk about four check tribal, and like, I think that's really cool and like Smiling Titan. But like, I think the evolution of the four checks is something you saw with Kevin Broberg winning the world championship, and now here with my deck, which is like, hey, some of these cards are just really good. And like you should probably just play them as like add-ons to your three checks. And so I think like Ravages of War is a very playable card. Like I think a lot of Gdoras were playing a like multiple, like there's a 5 diff and a 4 diff that I wasn't playing that says like discard your opponent's a card from their hand. And like
Mhm.
Ravages of War is a way better version of that costs three more, right?
Yeah,
Like
like the
so,
the
so
Ripper is one that comes to mind on
the
Death
Ripper,
Attuned.
and then there's a 5 diff from like AOT2 that people were playing, and I can't remember, but like I think people just like maybe need like think about it as you're building your deck. Like I think people who are saying, "Oh, I'm not playing four check tribal, I'm not going to play a four check," like that's the mentality of like you should probably still consider it because Ravages of War is one of like the most like insanely value statted cards, right? Like David,
Mhm.
I know you're really good at analyzing like the stats on the card per per difficulty, right? And like I'd be curious if you agree, but that is like doing way too much. So it's just an insane value card.
Yeah, I would put it at like a B tier on stats, but like A tier on ability. The discard a card, discard a momentum, sacrifice a foundation. Like typically all three of those don't matter at the same time. Um, but one or two will
I
always
think
matter.
the hidden text is that's really like discard 2 cards though, because like your opponent is not just gonna sit there and take 8 damage. Like
Yeah.
8 damage is a lot, and so it's generally speaking, discard 2 cards, which is to me insane.
Yeah, and typically one or two of those abilities is online. Like on in an early turn, sacrificing a foundation could be pretty big to force your rival, if they had a bad build. Um, or, late in the game, like you said, desculpting somebody, discarding a card, or maybe in the mid game, getting them to spend a momentum hurts some momentum based plan that they had going on. So one or two of those is like always online, whether it's early game or late game. And so I do think it's a really versatile include, putting
Yeah,
in put
the biggest
and
field bad about Ravages of War was sweeping daggers. Like people like you would think looking at my deck like or Gdora, right? Like sweeping daggers true 100 is like broken, right? And I'm not saying it's not really good, but like I could handle that like literally 10 times out of 10. The interaction I could not handle was sweeping daggers taking Ravages of War. So if my opponent was playing sweeping daggers, unless I like had the right read that like I could play around it, I would literally just incubating out Ravages of War immediately if I could, because like that is an absolute blowout. If somebody plays Ravages of War on a 4 diff, like I cannot deal with that interaction.
yeah, especially when your cards in hand as Gdora are such a precious resource, so
Yeah,
that you don't have to
that's
blow
like
up the
not
stage.
acceptable. So yeah. Anyways,
That's such a high level move, though, to incubating out the attacks that you like. I mean, the attacks that you're scared of being copied. And that's kind of like a huge advantage of incubating in the late game against these sweeping daggers decks that I didn't even really consider. But before that's kind of everything that I had. Are there any interactions, any cards that you think I left off the table?
yeah, I mean, I think like there's a lot of like hidden synergy and things like what I just mentioned, like incubating is like hidden synergy with playing like Ravages of War and True 100, because
Mhm.
if like basically if you know your deck really well, like the interactions that are really bad for your deck, right? So like when I played Justin Birch, game one, I was able to just like kill him because he Smiling Titan plays really high difficulty attacks, and I saw an opening to like stun out his like resets, right?
Mhm.
But game two, he just built like I think he had 9 resets at one point, so it was like there was no way my deck was built to like win that game, right? So you have to like pivot and figure out your like hidden synergies, right, in your deck. And so like me playing like Nonagon over again or Invincible Body over again, like as Ghidorah, it becomes like the way I win that match. And so like making that read of like, oh, if I'm gonna play like these super like value oriented attacks in a sweeping daggers meta, like maybe you need to play Dr. Ichigagi and Nonagon and incubating or like a combination of those, because if not, you're just asking for it, right? So
Mhm.
I think there's like taking the gloves off with Dr. Ichigagi was another one. Like you have to protect your win cons and
Mhm.
your like most valuable pieces, right? So I think that's just something to think about for people who maybe want to like elevate their deck building, is like don't just say like, oh, I can't play this deck because of sweeping daggers. Like that might be true, but there are a few answers. So like you got to try, you know what I mean? So I think that's the thing I would most tell people is like, don't be afraid of like just play a bigger deck if you want to play a bunch of 3 diffs. Like the ratios, like the
Mhm.
math's the same. Like you playing 4 3 diffs on a 60 card list is like almost the same as playing, like 8 3 diffs like an 85 card, 90 card deck. Like it's not exactly the same. Like you're taking more
Mhm.
risk, is pretty much the same value. So it's like I think people should just like be very thoughtful around like your strategies and your win cons, and like know what you need to protect against.
Yeah, and I think you also showed that in what you were saying earlier about Dragon of the Darkness Flame. Like, okay, so I know exactly when I'm citing this in. I'm citing it in when I lose game one and I have to win game two quickly. And you're a lot of players wouldn't even think about Dragon because it's a two check and you're playing like 10 3 devs. But you understand that if I'm citing this in, it means I lost game one. Like, it's time to go all in. I don't have a choice but to push the chips into the middle of the table and go all in. So you're okay playing the two check, but only for that very specific purpose. Whereas a lot of people might just skip over a two check when they have so many three difficulty foundations. Or like you were saying earlier, a lot of people skip over the four check attacks when they're playing a more normal attack lineup of three checks.
Yeah, I mean, I think last point is like TC made a great point of like in the metas we're in, you don't like really need a sideboard. Like you really need to the game has gotten so powerful that you need to mainboard your sideboard. You know what I mean by that. And so the sideboard is becoming less and less important. Like I was telling you, like I'm signing a bunch of cards for like if I just win game one, like maybe there's a little bit of value. But like you don't really like there used to be a time where you would like be like, I'm gonna side these three cards if I play pony, I'm gonna side these three cards if I play like this character, right? And that time is
Mhm.
basically over. Like until the power level comes down, like your sideboard should be very specific.
Yeah, and I don't think the power level. Well, this is a whole different conversation. I don't think it's coming down. I think it's
Yeah.
a result of how much product has been put out that we have thousands of cards legal. Um, I think they could ban 20 cards and we would still be going crazy with power because there's just the card pool is so big right now. There's so many different strategies are viable to such a big degree. Um, well, before I let you go, any shout outs you'd like to say or anything else about your deck that you'd like to point out?
Yeah, I'll give some shout outs to you, David, for being I think and I'd be curious for your view, but when I joined the team, your team, it really felt like there was maybe when I first joined, people were a little bit more like, oh, this is a way to like test our decks together on Tuesday and like get advice. And then I think it started to evolve into like, okay, we're gonna like cook on like what are the best meta decks, and then like how
Mhm.
do we optimize our decks and like sideboards and interactions to like beat these best decks and like practice those specific matchups like to the level where you're ready to go at the event. And like I think I was like, objectively, and I say this like I was doing pretty well last year when I wasn't on a team,
Mhm.
but like joining this team like brought me to the next level because I was able to get that practice, that input from other players, like yourself included. Like you'll probably remember when I was like tagging you and I was like, David, like tell me about my Gdora list. Like what am I doing wrong? Like and that,
Mhm.
so I think it's like the shout outs are to people like if you're on a team, for me it's Let's Talk UVS. For other people it might be a different team, or it might just be a friend group. Like you guys got to use your friends, man. Like diversity of opinion is the best way to get better. And so I want to give a shout out to everyone on the team. And I also want to shout out my locals who unfortunately were punching bags for this Gdora list. Like, there's a guy in my locals, Oscar, who started like he started mainboarding for me and my other friend who also was playing a control deck, like four of the action that like resets the stage. And it's like, come on. And then I see him, he's like asking for cards for people to bring them, and I see him asking for like the three diff that's like -1 to your check Deadlock. And I'm like, dude, like you're asking me for this card, like come on, like
I know what you're doing. Yeah.
yeah. So shout out to the locals and for helping me and allowing me to like play some toxic stuff to get better and helping me. And yeah, that's pretty much it.